Hello and welcome to episode 60 of the Spotlight Games podcast. Today we are going to spoil the ever-loving shit out of God of War Ragnarok in our spoiler cast. So let's jump right in. Friend of the show, Cameron Hawkins, joining us, as well as my sweet dumpster boy, Cayman. Cayman, we'll get to you in a second. Cameron, how are you, sir?
I'm good. I'm excited to talk about this game. I'm interested in. I think this game, initially got gold stars across the board, but I have seen some more nuanced, I think, takes on this game that aren't just like this is one of the greatest games ever made. And I think that there's a lot to discuss.
I completely agree. Cayman, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Patrick. Thanks for asking.
How's that beautiful back of yours?
We're progressing in the positive direction. We'll put it that way.
Okay. Fantastic. I love to hear it. Let's do some housekeeping and jump right in because we're going to have a thick show today because we're talking all about God of War. But we have a lot of video game stuff to talk about because this is the Spotlight Games podcast where each week we spotlight the latest and the greatest in the world of video games. You can get it by subscribing to our YouTube channel at Spotlight Games Pod or by searching for Spotlight Games in your favorite podcast app. And hey, you can be on the show by tuning in as we record live Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern time, usually. Today, a little later, on twitch.tv/Spotlight Games Pod. So be sure to follow us there so that you're notified when we go live so you can be part of the conversation. Just got the buzz on my phone, so everyone knows we're live now. They have no excuse to not be here. Cayman, we have a new episode of Save Trash Cinema live on the feed. What do we cover this week?
Oh, well, I suppose if you're live listening now, no, there is no episode.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Because guess what? If you're listening on podcast, then there is one because we decided to push the episode back because we're starting off the month of Trashmas. With a trash talk all about Christmas horror films. We do a little deep dive into the history of Christmas and horror and how they coincide together. And then we go through just an extensive list of our favorite trash cinema Christmas films. So if you want to hear us talk about Bill Goldberg starring in Santa's Sleigh, or if you want to hear us talk about Linnea Quigley getting impaled on deer antlers in Silent Night, Deadly Night, then you should check out that episode. It is a ton of fun.
Well, I wasn't on that episode, as you know, so I'm excited to listen to that. Why don't we get to know our guest of the week a little bit? Cameron Hawkins, sir, tell the folks at home a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I'm a video game freelance writer. I have bylines on IGN, Fanbyte. I've been featured on GameSpot.
Yeah, you have.
I wrote for DualShockers originally. I've been featured on Kind of Funny a few times. And I love video games. I love talking about video games. And that's me.
Hey, well, we're excited to have you. Thanks for taking the time. A couple of little quick fire questions so our audience can get to know you a little bit more even. Do you have a favorite game of all time?
Kingdom Hearts 2.
Kingdom Hearts 2, great game. I know Cayman's not a big Kingdom Hearts guy.
That's fine. Honestly. You either love it or you're wrong, This is,
here's the thing. I'm often wrong, so
that is true.
There's no shame in that.
Cameron, do you have a favorite game of this year? If it's, might be God of War Ragnarok.
Yeah. It's not God of War Ragnarok. It's a game called Signalis.
Ooh, I really want to play that.
Yeah, it's this sci-fi. I don't want to say horror. There are definitely horror elements to it, but it's more like a suspense thriller, game where you're basically a cyborg that or robot, that wakes up on a planet on a spaceship, and it basically it's you figuring out what the hell's going on. And it's very surreal horror. So think of The Shining, where it gives you stuff, but it doesn't, it doesn't give it to you. This is that. You really have to, and even after playing it, I think I could not, tell you absolutely, hey, this is what this game's about. This is what the story is hopefully about from beginning to end. I think it's a very interesting game, and I think it just really succeeds in everything that it tries to accomplish. Its audio design is far and away the best that I've heard this year. Like I've experienced this year. Incredible art direction, really cool gameplay mechanics, great puzzles. Like, you know, it's I really have no notes out like to really criticize about this game. I really like it's a really, really great game. And it should have been like the indie of this year, and in my opinion, it should have been a Game of the Year nominee, but you know, it kind of just came out at a bad time. It came out during the cycle of review season,
Sure.
as we call it. That, you know, the people that have played it, that I know that have played it, all give it glowing reviews, but it's just when you only have so much time to play games, you know,
Sure.
it's hard to pitch a game to someone and then like, all right, I'm going to play that over all the other games that I've already seen and know that I want to play.
Yeah.
So, but I highly recommend give it a try, give it a shot. It's, you know, you could beat it in 10 to 12 hours. It's not a super long experience. It's on Game
Correct
Pass.
if I'm wrong. Yeah, I was about to say Game Pass, right? There you go.
It is. Yep, it's on Game Pass.
That's how I will be playing it. That's for sure. Yeah, I have heard that it's really good, and now all of those that glowing recommendation. I think it might be the next game I play after God of War Ragnarok. Cayman, what have you been playing?
I've been playing Pokemon nonstop. I am 43 hours in to Pokemon. I've caught 288 Pokemon so
Wow.
far, which is probably the most I've ever caught in a sit-down session with Pokemon. I love these games, but normally I just kind of golden path them. And then once I'm done, I'm done. Like I'm
Sure.
not, but I don't know. The way that this game is structured to me just like really is hitting on everything. Now, I will say I've had 2 game crashes in 43 hours. So honestly, compared to what a lot of other people have said, I feel like I've lucked out, right?
Sure. Better than Cult
Like-
of the Lamb, that's for sure.
Oof. So like there's definitely issues with the game, technically speaking. There's a ton of pop-in and stuff. And I do feel like later in the game, when you get to some of like the more like different looking vistas, like the game looks much better than I
Sure.
think that it did before. I will say that of the 43 hours, I think 4 of those was me just trying to find an Applin, which apparently is incredibly rare because I cannot fucking find one.
But you did.
No, I still have not.
Oh, you still haven't. Oh boy.
I still haven't. I've got everything I need to evolve them. I just can't fucking find one. And the thing is, I was sitting there last night. I'm laying in bed. I'm playing the game. And I'm like, this is like running headfirst into a tree. And guess what? Fun fact, to get them, you have to run headfirst into a tree to knock them out of the tree. And it's just a guessing game on if they're even going to be there. This is honestly the worst part of the entire game for me is this one Pokemon to catch. But
Look at
outside
that
of that,
cutie.
like,
Look at this little cutie.
look, I don't know if you've seen some of the other Pokemon that they've introduced this generation, but like there's some incredible, just absolutely adorable little things. Ultimately, though, I think that the game is not really getting much of a fair shake because of the technical issues. And whether or not that's right or wrong, I think is really based on who's playing it. For me personally, and I look past a lot of jank. Like I enjoyed Saints Row, and I am a massive fan of Bulletstorm. So like, jank doesn't affect me very much.
Yeah.
But this really is. I genuinely can say like I think this is the most fun I've had with a Pokemon game since potentially Red and Blue and Yellow.
Wow.
I've been like just absolutely hooked on this and have just been really loving it. I love all the new game designs, and I would say I've already beat all of the gyms, and I've already taken out all the Titan Pokemon. I have one more Team Star base I have to take out, and then I have Victory Road, and then there's like a whole post game that I haven't even touched yet. So I could definitely see me putting another 40 plus hours into this game, considering all that's still left to do, and the fact that like I'm so hooked on completing my Pokédex.
I love that. Because I know you liked Arceus. I almost said Atreus. You liked Arceus, but it wasn't as much your jam, it sounds like, as this one.
Yeah, no, I thought Arceus was really good, and I think it was a step in the right direction. And while I still think that this is a better step in the direction, I do think like at the end of the day, they need to take some time off. Like we need to take a couple of years. We take probably 3 years, maybe even longer, and then release like a full-fledged Pokemon game that is what they wanted to do with this, but better.
Sure.
And I don't know if it is limitations just based on hardware with the Switch that we can't get that. But I definitely think that like everything is lining up to really just knock it out of the park. We're just not there yet. And I feel like that's probably the biggest Pokemon gripe that most Pokemon fans do, is that they're always like, we're almost there. It's like the US and like winning the World Cup. It's like, we're almost there.
Well, I don't know if we're almost there. I mean, we're one step closer technically as of today, but
well, that's how Pokemon has been probably for the last decade, is we're one step closer, but we're just not there yet. And but I think from what the time I've spent with this game, I can definitely say like I could easily put as much time into this that I put into Elden Ring.
Okay. I can get down with that. I've been playing one game and one game only, and that's God of War Ragnarok. And I mean, I have been playing Marvel Snap, but we've talked a lot about Marvel Snap on this podcast the last couple of weeks. So I say we just rip off the Band-Aid, jump right in. So this is your final warning. This is all we're going to talk about the rest of this episode. So if you haven't finished the game and you don't want to be spoiled, this is your final warning to leave now. If you have played the game or you don't care about spoilers, we're about to rip off the Band-Aid. So we got 3, 2, 1. All right. Did either of you see Odin as Tyr coming at all?
Absolutely fucking not.
No, and I have mixed feelings about it, to be honest.
Yeah. Talk to me about it.
I just like, it felt kind of random. Like it didn't feel like I you know, based off of how like Freya kept telling Atreus specifically, like, oh, like he cannot be trusted. He always has something like going on. Like, I didn't think of it as he's secretly Tyr this entire time. It's more of he's got, you know, his plans. There's more to his plans than what he's letting on. And
sure.
And so for me, I was just like, okay, like let's see what his real end game plan is. Not, he's Tyr secretly, like, you know.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like it feels a little dissonant that this guy who's supposed to be such a like being able to outsmart everybody, his plan was just listen to the other guy's plan in a way.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of it that way. I didn't see it coming at all. Like did you guys catch any of the hints? Because apparently the game is riddled with hints throughout.
There's a couple moments earlier on in the game where you'll have different characters be like, well, hold on, he's dead. Like he's been dead for a while. He's not locked up. He's dead. And like there's little things like that they've kind of that like I remember like picking up on, but like definitely didn't expect that.
Yeah.
And it also kind of leads me, there's like a lot of like loose ends, I think, narrative wise regarding this big reveal.
Sure.
Where it's like the whole thing is everyone keeps saying like Odin has no ability to get here. He can't be here. He can't. This is like one place that we're safe from him. And so I get the idea that like, well, if they bring Odin there, he can, but like, how is he getting back and forth to the tree? Like, how is he getting to Sindri's house? How is this working out? And like, there's like a disconnect there for me where it's like, ultimately at the end of the day, like I was so caught and so surprised by the big twist that like I didn't really care in the moment. But like looking back on it, I'm like, I don't know. Some of these things might not shake out.
I think the implication is that in this broom closet that he was supposedly sleeping in, one of the ravens just like was in there. But then I'm like, okay, if one of the ravens was in there, like, was it just being silent the whole time? Did no one go in the closet and notice a raven? I don't know. I think it's one of those things that maybe we're not supposed to think about. Not that, you know, that's an excuse by any means, but yeah, I hadn't even really thought of it until, you guys brought it up. That's interesting. I just kind of took it for what it was. I was like, wow, I didn't see that coming. But that's a good point. But okay, so that's the kind of one of the big reveals. Let's take a step back. Cam, overall, like high level thoughts. What did you think about this game?
So, I mean, I guess I should go back and explain how I feel about just the franchise as a whole.
Sure.
I actually
good place to start.
I actually like prefer the original God of War games from just in general. I like the arcadiness of the combat. I like how over the top it was. The first God of War originally is still my favorite God of War game, just because I still vividly remember like that Pandora's box segment of the game where I was just like, wow, this is like some of the best level design I've ever experienced. Like, and I still think about that today. And I just think that it was a lot more straightforward and knew exactly what it wanted to be, and it succeeded in that way. And God of War 2018, like, at the time, the year it came out, it wasn't even in my top 10. I don't believe, at least. And I went back to play it right before Ragnarok came out, and I definitely had more appreciation
Okay.
for it. And in general, when it comes to Ragnarok, I think that it feels, in my opinion, pretty obvious that they just didn't want to do a third game,
Sure.
and they tried to get Ragnarok to fit into a second and third act into one experience, and it was affected because of that.
Sure.
Like I think that I like Ragnarok more overall, just simply because than 2018, even though I think 2018 is a better game, just because, again, it's similar to the first God of War, where it knows exactly what it's trying to do. It's doing one thing, it's doing one thing only when it comes to like its narrative, and like what the the relationship between Kratos and Atreus. But in this one, it's juggling so many things, and some things like just like I feel like some plot points just like, or what feel like plot points, just never get mentioned again, end very anticlimactically. Um, you know,
What's an
or
example of that for you? Like
so
what's one
like
that you wish they had kind of pulled out more?
um I don't even know if I really want to say that I wanted them to pull it out more, because I wasn't that interested in it from
Okay.
the beginning. But like the stuff with the giants, like oh, this is the part of the prophecy leading to Ragnarok. I got to give you this, but then like, or like and tell you about how these giants are actually in these things, and it's never really relevant again until the stuff with Odin at the very very end of the game. I'm like,
Sure.
oh, okay, well, I thought there was going to be
That kind of felt to me like I don't know. I mean, this is another question I was going to ask. Like, what do we think comes next? But I kind of want to save that for later. But that
sure.
whole plot line to me just felt like setting up a potential future for Atreus. Like that's his
Sure.
next adventure is going to find. It didn't. It did feel a little like forced in there, and that like this was their way of giving him a future that wasn't involved with Kratos.
And yeah, that's a whole another topic to talk
Yeah,
about.
go jump in. Yeah.
Well, I just think that like I wanted this game to end with Kratos dying.
Okay.
I wanted it to be his final chapter. I get what the game was trying to do with its messaging, but like what you're saying with like Atreus, like there now being the freedom to be like an Atreus game. Like, why would I want to play as Atreus when I can play as Kratos?
Sure.
You know what I mean?
That's a
Like,
very good point.
Yeah.
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 and so for me, and this is just like, you know, if I were, if I was the director of God of War, I would have really loved Kratos dying in this game, and there was a third game, and it was Atreus going back to Greece and seeing everything that Kratos did, seeing like walking the sins of his father, and
Sure.
and like realizing, because as someone who had a complicated relationship with his own father, just like knowing what, like just kind of seeing like why Kratos had this mindset towards Atreus and why he was pushing these ideas to Atreus in the first two games. And it's like, because if not, this is what happens. Like, this is what the results are. And I thought that would be really interesting. I don't know, like, particularly how it would work when it comes to like the boss fights and like things like that, but that's not why I'm playing I like was excited to play God of War Ragnarok. I wanted to know the story. I wanted to know the result of the story. And so yeah, that's the thing for me. It's just like, sure, like that they definitely could set up something with Atreus, but knowing that Kratos is still alive, it's just like I feel like I would just be playing that entire game being like, man, I wish I was playing as Kratos,
Sure.
like, because he's way more fun to play as, and he's
Yeah.
you know
I mean, in this game, like when you play as Atreus, it's really cool. And like, what a cool moment to, I think we all kind of expected, like, we're probably going to play as Atreus this game, but
yeah
for it to finally happen, but then to very much feel like I still felt like the companion as him. Like it never felt like
Yeah, he's not fleshed out.
Yeah, which I think was probably a choice that they made. Like,
No, I mean, it makes sense narratively for him not to have like such incredible combat skills as
Sure.
Kratos does. Now, I could see potentially like in a future game, if they do release a future game where you are following Atreus through, his stuff, then that opens up the door for him to kind of have the same Kratos origins, not origin story, but like the way that the games function when they originally came out, where it was you're gaining combat abilities, you're gaining skills as you go because you're learning how to be a god. With Atreus, I think that style of game now works. Whereas a game like this, if you were to be like, oh, well, now Kratos is like, he just learned how to swing his axe, like that doesn't make sense anymore. Like it doesn't make sense anymore for it. Like you have to start with so like starting him off already with the Chaos Blades and having Leviathan Axe, like already starting with those two weapons in the beginning, that makes sense because I feel like in the older games, and Cam, you can step in and correct me, but like they pulled the old narrative trope where they try to take all of your abilities away. Specifically for me, I distinctly remember God of War 3, where you plummet down to Hades and you hit the river Styx, and then basically the spirits suck out all of your powers.
Yeah.
So it takes you back to square one. And it works narratively when you structure it like that. But in a thing like this, like I don't think it works anymore. I don't think that works anymore. Like that's a very like PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3 kind of thing. I don't think it fits. And so I think for me, like having Atreus feel like that is you're still feeling like he's coming into his own. He's learning how to do these things because all of the times you're playing as Atreus, he's no longer with Kratos in these moments. So it works for me that's the route that they opted to go through because, he's basically having to try to do this. So he feels weaker. He doesn't feel like he's as in control, and you are very much more overwhelmed by enemies when you're playing as him, whereas the same situation you play as with Kratos, you don't feel that way. You're very much in command at all times. And so like, I do like the way that works, but I will say that the combat with Atreus was always the parts where I wasn't as fulfilled with the gameplay aspect, just because like Cam said, that's like being like, hey, you can play as one or the other. Which one? Do you want to play as a little boy or do you want to play as Kratos? It's like
the God of War.
I want to play as the God of War. So like every time you took me from Kratos and you put me in Atreus, those to me were the weakest parts in terms of gameplay mechanics. However, I do feel like that those were some of the stronger parts in terms of like narrative for me.
Yeah, I would agree.
Like his conversations with Thrud and like him working alongside Thor at certain moments. And like his interactions with Heimdall, like all of those moments to me felt really good. And like I really enjoyed like the story in those moments. Not to say that Kratos doesn't have some, because I will say, like, I think my biggest issue with 2018's God of War is that I'm used to, if I'm thinking of God of War, I'm thinking of massive boss fights, like these huge set pieces, right? And so when I'm playing this game in 2018, I'm like, well, there's only like a couple big boss fights, and it's always against the same boss, right?
Yeah.
So when you fight Yggdrasil or Nidhogg, sorry, when you fight Nidhogg,
oh, what a great battle!
I was like, this is the closest I've felt in terms of like exhilaration in a boss fight since when you fight Kronos in God of War 3. Like that kind of level of boss fight where it just feels so cinematic and it feels just like holy shit. And then, of course, I've got the 65-inch OLED and I've got my backlights are adjusted correctly and they're all like flashing around, and like I was like fully immersed, and I'm like, this is what video games should be. And like this was probably the highlight, I think, at least of this year for me personally. Like that one boss fight was like the highlight of video games for me this year. Like this one gameplay.
I feel like this game like really stepped it up. I mean, we've all talked about like there's so many new enemies, and that's like a really kind of a breath of fresh air compared to 2018 because there was like 4 enemies in that game.
Yeah,
and this one there were a ton, but I feel like they did a really good job with the boss fights. But like a lot of them felt very different than the other ones, and a lot of them like were packed with narrative like reveals and things like that, and they carried a lot of weight story wise. Like, would you guys agree? Like, do you have a favorite? Cam, you just said the Needhog one is your favorite. Cam, did you have a favorite boss fight, or what did you think about
Yeah,
those?
and I think that I think this I think that both 2018 and Ragnarok have the same issue for me, where my favorite boss fight is the first boss fight. Like fighting Balder, like by the house, was like by far the like my favorite moment in the entirety of that game,
Yeah,
and one of my favorite, like one of the coolest boss fights. Like I don't know if it would be in my top 10 favorite boss fights, but I think it's like high up there of just pure like, making me feel like a god, like feeling
yeah,
like that these are two gods fighting each other. And Thor, when you fight Thor, I mean technically it's Atreus as the bear, but um Thor, and I think this game starts off very strongly. And similarly to the first game. And I think that that Thor's boss fight was incredible. I was just like immediately like, oh, we're in it, like we're
yeah.
going. And I just like, man, it makes me think about a lot of things just of the game in general, but the Thor boss fight was cool. And the whole like, him resurrecting him, like that part was cool. Like I wasn't like, oh shit, like, or anything like that. But I was like, okay, that was really cool that they did that, in the way of what it is. But also like, Kratos ain't gonna die that easy too. You know what I mean?
Right.
The same way I was like, Kratos ain't gonna die that easy. But I get what they wanted to do it for the shock value, and like I think they, more or less succeeded there. And I do wish that there was a moment where Kratos picked up Mjolnir. That would have been really cool. He was just like he was just strong enough to somehow do it, like, because that's Kratos bullshit,
For
right?
sure,
Like,
yeah.
that's what I want to see. So,
Okay, but I think you're muted.
yeah,
Sorry, there's a moment in the last fight where he's like Thor throws Mjolnir at him, and Kratos like grabs the handle and actually stops it. But that's like the closest we get to it.
That's
Like,
that's the closest.
I'm curious if, to your point, like you enjoyed. So like the opening boss fight against Thor is fucking wild. It is incredible. But what did you think about the last boss fight? Because for me, like,
go ahead.
I guess for me, like, it was just, I feel like it was so jam packed full of like narrative moments inside of the fight. And I both really enjoyed that, but I also was like, I feel like I'm missing out on stuff in that fight because they're like, he's like trying to like have a conversation with the mid fight, but I'm like so busy trying not to get my ass kicked. And like,
Sure.
I'm like, what is happening? Like, what are you guys talking about? And like, maybe that's kind of the point of like why they did it, but like, I don't know. I was very torn on that aspect of that fight.
And you're implying to the fight with Thor, correct?
Yes, the final boss fight with Thor, yeah.
Like where like Thor, and then that goes like directly into fighting Odin.
Yeah. Like right before Thor dies, yeah.
Yeah. I definitely think it's weaker than the first fight for me. I think it wasn't bad per se. I just like didn't get the same adrenaline going, or like I wanted to feel that way. Like the thing that I was wanting after the fight with Thor, I was like, okay, I need the, because we get this like we get this like characterization of Thor through Atreus, and I'm just like, okay, I want to know, like, I just think that like overall a big part of that fight that like really lowered the quality for me was just the end result. Like it felt like very like abrupt, that it's just like, all right, Odin's killing Thor and Thor's gone. I'm like, that's how Thor's gone. Like it just felt very,
I totally agree with
that. I was just very like shocked in not a good way. I was just like, wow, that's really disappointing.
So I have a question. And I know this is kind of a weird, like not off topic, but still part of this particular fight with Thor. So Odin kills Thor with the spear. So do we think that that's actually like where the prophecy actually breaks? Is because in the prophecy, it's Odin, or it's Kratos being killed with the spear in like the same position and setup and everything. That's the prophecy. Instead, it is Thor who steps up and is in the way and then has the confrontation. Then he's the one that gets the spear through the chest. Do we think that that's where the break is? Because this is where I have like my biggest gripe with the game in terms of its narrative is everything to do with the prophecy. Because nothing makes sense to me. I don't understand because he still kills Heimdall.
Yep.
And it's just, and there's like moments that I'm like, okay, well, this, I don't understand where the prophecy separates and they forge their own path at what point.
You can tell that the writers of this game really wanted you to feel that uncertainty on whether or not the prophecy was going to come true or not.
Yeah.
And I think Heimdall's fight was a really big portion of a really big moment for that. But like, and I don't want to get too sidetracked here, but I know that we will because there's so much to talk about.
There's so much to talk
about. Similar to what you said about like, did anyone expect Tyr to be or Odin to be Tyr? This is the one thing that I just kept like for the first like half of the game. I was just like, I really hope I'm not the only one who feels this way, but I'm just like, is Atreus a fucking idiot? Like for the first half of the game, like he literally said, I can't go to Asgard because that's in the prophecy. And then 5 minutes later, hey Odin, take me to Asgard.
Yeah.
Bro,
well, here's the thing. I think that's totally fair from both of you to be like came in with the prophecy, like you were having a lot of issues with that splitting and Cam with that. I feel like at the heart of this game, it asks the question, can we control our fate? Can we control our destiny? Like that's the thesis of this game to me. And I think a lot of these narrative decisions is them tackling that question, but without a clear answer until the end. And I think that's where it starts to kind of, it starts to fall apart for me is like, I like this idea of like, Angerboda has put all these things like she's seeing these visions, she's painted these things so they're going to happen. Groa has all these visions. They're in the boards in the secret little backdoor panels, which was also narrative plot armor. So it's going to happen, but they're making the choice like, hey, we know that this is going to be our fate, but what if we go against that? And so I feel like that is kind of their reasoning. I just don't know that it always succeeds.
Yeah, because it's also just like the whole Tyr's going to take the army to Asgard, and then ends up being Kratos, and it's just like again, I just don't. I think that there are some things that are done like kind of sloppily that like don't. It's just kind of like a head scratcher. I'm just like, wait, to the point where it's like it's confusing me, like, and it's not like me theorizing, it's me like, wait, no, what's going on? Like what's happening now? Because that was like one of the first things, that was like the first one that they went to, right? It was like, oh, Groa like hid this truth, and then it's Tyr, and then he ends up being Odin, and then it's just like it's one of those things like, again, I feel like that they were trying to juggle too much. And I think that certain parts in the plot took a hit for it. And this is one of them. Like, I feel like that, like, originally there was a plan to do something, and then they were like, oh, we got to do something else. So Odin's going to be Tyr. And then I just don't know. I'm just like, I feel like if I played it again, and now that I know, like, the whole, Odin is secretly Tyr thing, and paid attention to certain, like, moments more, I think that like I would be more clear on like my feelings right now regarding it. But because it's a long game too, way longer than the first game.
Yeah, I roll credits at 38 hours.
Yeah, something like that for sure. That I just think that again, they were just trying to handle too much stuff. And again, some stuff I think I just didn't care about, or just went on for too long. There's some things that I was really happy that they addressed or like talked about, but didn't do enough. Like, or like, I'm just like, how do they not do this? Because they didn't. And I'm more particularly talking about like Kratos' past. Him talking to Freya about Calliope,
Sure.
and like his, his previous family, and I was
Yeah.
like, fine, like 'cause that's why that was the big thing I was missing in the first game. I was like, bro, what,
Yeah.
we need to
Yeah.
know about your past. And that was another thing with Freya, because Freya was like, oh, I had no idea. I was like, I got the idea in the first game that you did know, because you said, I know who you are. I know you're a god. I know, like,
Sure.
so for me, I was like, oh, his past, why he did what he did, but
Yeah.
apparently not. So yeah, it's a whole lot of things, and just like even by the end of the game, like he never at least I'm assuming, because they never say it, Atreus has no idea about Kratos' past family, and that's insane to me. That is like borderline unacceptable to me.
Sure. Yeah, I feel like that it's one of those things where like you would expect that to be addressed at some point in their future. Now, does that mean it's a future game? I don't know, but it's a little odd that they didn't address it in this game. But I think it kind of goes back to your point of them just having so much in the game. And I mean, honestly, for me, I didn't have that issue as much, but there were things that like the prophecy stuff didn't bother me, but the places that it did bother me honestly was mostly Thor's character. I really loved Ryan Hurst as Thor. I thought he did a great
Really?
job.
God, absolutely incredible.
But the issue that I had, like, I liked this very much, like he is just existing to impress Odin. And as we kind of start seeing more of him through the game, like you kind of realize that he's very unhappy in this role, but he does this because he's Odin's son, and it's his nature, right? Like the whole conversation at the end with Kratos, we're destroyers, and he's like, well, we don't have to be, we can change for our children, which I thought was a cool moment. But to like, and like there are parts of it that I enjoyed. Like I enjoy, maybe is the wrong word, but like him being an alcoholic and like seeing Thrud deal with having an alcoholic father, like that's something that you just don't see tackled in video games very much, but it's something that they tackled in like literally 45 seconds. And it's like, that is a really thick, like deep topic that is like, could be really painful for a lot of people and really like relatable for a lot of people. And for it to be like a Z plot line in this game, that just rubbed me the wrong way. Like if this is something that you guys feel passionately enough about to have as a plot point in this game, lean into it more. But then they couldn't, because the game was so big. Like there was just so much happening that it's like they couldn't talk more about Thor being an alcoholic and like them having a toxic family relationship. Because if they did that, the game would have been 5 more hours. And at that point, the pacing is just all fucked. And so like, that's where I start having problems with the game, which honestly, I don't have many problems with this game. I was very glowing about this, but that was one of those things like toward the end when Thor's really drunk and Thrud is like, I don't remember exactly what she says, but she's basically like, you can stop doing this. Like you can choose to be a better father. It's like, wow, we're 34 hours into this game, and seems like something that's not going to have very much more, and it sure didn't. And that was just those kinds of things is what disappointed me with the plot.
I think that that's Sony, Santa Monica, or PlayStation, whoever you want to say, really marketed Thor in a way that I thought he would be a lot more prominent in this game than he ended up being. Thor was like from a character standpoint was definitely the most disappointing.
I would agree with that, as much as I liked his performance. Like because I expected so much more.
Because I would and because I was really digging everything that was happening, but it wasn't enough. And and
for him to be dead, I'm like, really?
Yeah. Again, and he just went out in a way that I just thought was like very anticlimactic. And
for a character that's been built up so much since the beginning of the first game, like the second we come out on the Lake of the Nines and Mimir tells the story about his statue, and another thing with Thor 2 that I just thought of, something that was really cool about the last game that I expected to have more of an answer from was the whole stuff with Jormungandr, of him being like knocked back into the past by Thor.
Yes.
It was such a big plot line from the first game. And like we see it happen technically in the Siege of Asgard, but I was just surprised that it was literally just a 3-second thing and then it was done. Like I did like the couple lines that they layered in throughout the game, specifically like with the marbles, right? Like when I believe the implication is the marble that Atreus gives in Angerboda's grandma's house, that is Jormungandr. And he grows up because she has that line like, "Oh, he's getting so much bigger and like way faster than he should be." And so I think right came in like that's the implication is that
that's the way I read it. And I kind of want to just stop here for just a second and mention that as much as I really liked Angerboda, like I liked her character, I liked her inclusion, and I liked the story about her grandmother and all of that. But this whole section of the game was way too fucking long.
Really?
Way too fucking
You're
long.
the first. Patrick. You're the first person that I've talked to that doesn't feel that way.
That was one of my questions today. Like I've been seeing so much like divisive conversation online. Like a lot of people really don't like the Ironwood section. I loved it.
I'm not saying that I didn't like. I like the idea of it.
It was a little long though.
I think it was about 30 minutes too long.
100%.
If they just trim the fat just a little bit. We always talk all the time.
I don't remember what the activity, when it happened, but there was a point even where she, like with the dialogue, made it sound like, all right, we're wrapping up here, and then something else happened, and then they just start doing something else, and I'm just like, and it keeps going for 30 more minutes, and I'm like, I thought we were about to head out. What's going on here?
I think what we didn't need was all the stuff in the caves, like preparing to go to the grandma's house. Like I feel like we could have just gone to the grandma's house because I really loved I like
that boss fight a lot. I
love the boss fight.
It's really cool.
And like of all of the game's companions, she was actually one of my favorites. Like I really love just visually, it was so like beautiful that she basically like her power was like her colors and her paint like that just visually was really cool. And so I feel like because they built it and made it so nice, they added more combat in just so that we could see more of it. But like that whole stuff, like in the I don't even remember what we were doing in the caves. I didn't necessarily need that, but the boss fight was one of my favorites of the game. And I just wish we had gotten there a little faster. So I guess I do agree with you guys, that it was a little long.
What we always talk about on Save Trash Cinema, and it happens quite a bit, is we are like, hey, this movie needs to take off 15 minutes. Like we got to chop 15 minutes off of this. It's just too fat or too bloated. But there's also moments where it's like this particular scene or sequence was too long, or this portion of the movie was too long. It should have been trimmed, and that extra time should have been put elsewhere to build upon XYZ. In my head, I'm like, we needed to take 30 minutes out of Ironwood, and we needed to put 30 minutes into whoever the fuck Scold is.
School Deer?
My biggest grievance, there's a particular scene where Atreus, Thrud, and Scold, they're hanging out, and they're like having like a chit chat. And then I want to say it's like Sif shows up, and she's like, the two of you have to come with me. And then like
it's like in the middle of the siege.
Yeah, no. This was at this was before I think Heimdall. They let the wolf loose. I'm trying to remember the wolf's name. Garm. Before they let it loose, before they get taken. So maybe it's Heimdall shows up or something. It's like, we gotta go. But it's the three of them like hanging out. They're like talking about how she wants to be a Valkyrie, and we get like a 30-second here, and then it cuts, and then a little bit later, like we talk, like Atreus mentions, he's like, yeah, and Scold really, really likes Thrud. And I'm like, I would love to have seen that.
Sure.
I don't want you just to briefly tell, because he becomes important again during the siege. Then he becomes important again at the end of the game.
And post game. There's stuff with him in the post game.
And it's like, who the fuck is he? Like, this is like, you need to take the bloated bits and like, this is one of those where I'm like, if you just take some of the fat and add it in to flesh out like just one or two characters, flesh out the forge the underwater forge.
Oh my God.
Flesh that out a little bit more, because I love that. That was so cool.
Love that.
And like, it's just kind of, that's where it's like, it just feels like some of the narrative choices on like where they wanted to spend some time wasn't always the right choice for me.
And I think to add to that, something that I really, really, really wanted more of was Faye. Like I thought it was cool that we had flashbacks with her. And I love Deborah Ann Wilson from Daredevil, True Blood. Like, love that actress. But like that first moment where Kratos goes to sleep and he starts dreaming, and like, which the transitions in this game are really well done. Yeah. Whether it's switching characters or going into dreams, like that was really good. But I I just was, by the end of the game, I was like, wow, I'm kind of surprised at how little we got of Faye. And maybe part of that was they didn't want to force more in. Like maybe there just wasn't more to say. But I was surprised that we only really were with her like 2.5 times. And I say half because one of them was like really, really short. What did you guys think though? Did you like the Faye flashbacks? Did you also want more of that? Or is that a me problem?
I enjoyed them.
I wanted more because I wasn't really that interested in what we got.
Sure.
Like I
agree. I agree. Like I wanted more.
These just felt like snippets of their, like, you know, their relationship, and I just was like, I don't know. I wasn't even like convinced that they were in love, like, or that they were like, you know, like I needed to buy the relationship, like, and if it's Kratos being Kratos, then I'm just like, I don't know. It just kind of like didn't do much for me.
It's almost like a trap they made for themselves because at that time Kratos hasn't grown as much as he has in the present day, and the present day Kratos is a lot more comfortable with like expressing emotion. Still not a lot, but like more than he was, right?
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's kind of like a trap. But I would have expected and accepted seeing a much more emotional Kratos with Faye because it's Faye and because it's like the first time he's loved someone since his wife in Greece. And so I that was one of those things where it's like, I feel like you want to do this and you're just not committing. And that was disappointing for me because I thought it was cool that they introduced her.
Yeah, like I wanted like a scene where he was like, you know, not, I mean, I don't need him bawling like to Faye about his mistakes and his sins and things like that, but like I wanted to see him vulnerable with her.
Sure.
And you know, and we got a few of those moments with him and Atreus, and even then they didn't go as hard as I wanted them to. Like I think that like the whole like making a promise scene was probably the peak of that, like where you know he does confide it to Atreus a bit, but it still just didn't go as far as I wanted it to. But yeah, I thought the Faye parts were fine.
Yeah, I will say, I think there were a few moments that really, really stood out to me between Kratos and Atreus. I think the most notable ones, like after, which we haven't even talked about Brock at all yet, which we definitely need to.
Yeah, we'll talk about
But
that.
after Brock dying, they go on the hunting trip because Atreus is obviously in a lot of pain. And they're hunting the deer. It's the same, maybe not the exact same deer from the first game, but I might as well say it was.
It's a throwback to the first game for sure.
Definitely a throwback to the first game. It's a full circle moment. And you go, it does the nice transition where you've been playing as Kratos, and then it goes to Atreus pulling the bow, and Kratos puts his hand over it and stops it. And it's like, what does he say? He says, I sent this to Cayman last night and I wrote it down, and now I'm having,
he says the lines are along the lines of like,
I got it. When an animal is wounded, it must stop the bleeding. We are wounded. This is a distraction. And so like that moment I thought was really nice. And then during the siege, after, you know, Brock still is dead and Sindri is just in so much pain, but he still shows up even without the Svartalfheim army. And he's like, you know, is this what you wanted, essentially? And Atreus is trying to close his heart off because that's what his father has taught him, that Sindri is hurting. All these people are dying that shouldn't be dying. So close your heart, close your heart. And then Kratos says to him, open your heart. No. That's what his wife said to him. You feel their pain because that is who you are, and you must never sacrifice that, not for anyone. I was wrong, Atreus. Open your heart to their sacrifice. That's your mother's wish and mine as well. Today, son, today we will be better. Like that, I thought was a really beautiful moment.
Yeah.
And there were a couple of those throughout the game.
Yeah.
That like the mocap of Christopher Judge as Kratos, I thought was so well done. Like these kinds of moments came across for a character that is still, he holds back a lot, but you could see him holding back and like trying to do his best to let loose a little bit. And I really, really loved those moments of that.
Yeah, I have a question. This is completely unrelated to that, but Who the fuck blew Gallahorn in the first game?
We don't know.
That's
And
another one where a part of me is like, they were going to do something with it and they couldn't figure out how to do it. So they're just going to leave the mystery alone and just be like, maybe we'll answer it. Like, I don't know. That still kind of fucks with. There's like just little things like that kind of fuck with me. The oracles, that whole thing, like, still is a little to me. And I feel, the Norns and.
I liked the Norns section. I liked that a lot.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I liked it. My thing is I don't know how it works with everything else. After we've beat the game, we are where we are. I'm not sure how that works. I do feel like the Odin's noose. I love the fact that they pulled that from actual Norse mythology. I think that was a really cool aspect. But it was one of those like blink and you missed it moments. And then I had to like really remember when Freya pulls it out in the last boss fight. I had to like really think about it and be like, oh, it was in that scene. And like that, there's just like little things like that.
Oh, really? I remembered it well enough. I mean, granted, I like played through it pretty quickly. I don't know how long it took, but like, but I remember that pretty quickly. But you're right about the Norns. Like the Norns, that was the moment where like, I think where it felt like it was inevitable that like the prophecy wasn't going to change because the Norns made it feel that way. Like that's the thing. Like I feel like if I replay this game, there's going to be a lot of things that I kind of, because there's so much stuff. There's so many different things that like are about the prophecy that they try to convince you like, oh, this is going to happen, or the legitimacy of the prophecy and all this stuff that like, I think that if I replayed it, having played it, already once, that I'm going to see a lot more holes in the logic. Because again, like it feel like there's so many, like again, like the tier stuff with being Odin, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, and the part with the Norns, which was really cool, but it's just like, but we know I now know the result is that didn't happen, and that's literally what the Norns do. Like they know the future.
Sure. Like, is this the first time they've ever been wrong about anything?
Yeah, exactly. So it's just like I get it, but it just didn't
work for you.
Yeah. This didn't work for me.
Yeah, I get that. I really liked the noose thing too, Cayman. And like that whole segment of like I think it was called a Kelpie, the like water horse.
Yeah, that
like
was
going
so
through the
cool.
water. Like that was a really beautiful moment. That was so dope. And going into like and the area of the Norns I thought was really, really beautiful. But to your point, Cayman, about Gjallarhorn, I was listening to a spoiler cast today. I forget which one it was. It was either Kind of Funny or Podcast Beyond, because they had the game director on there, and they asked that question, whichever one it was like, so who blew Gjallarhorn in the first game? And he was like, ask Corey. I was like, are you fucking kidding me?
Fuck you guys.
How do we not?
Fuck you guys.
Fuck you guys.
Like, how do we not know? But yeah, I don't know. I guess it's one of those things I think we're just supposed to get over, I guess.
So kind of moving on a little bit, but like,
yeah.
So Brock.
Oh,
yeah.
Fuck.
We're just going to jump into this, right? So Brock dies. Obviously, he gets killed by Odin once the big reveal happens with Tyr, and here we are. Okay. Do we think that there will be, because in my head, we know that Sony Santa Monica, they're working on a few different projects right now. I am convinced, and I was partially convinced that this might be a reality, but then I was like, I don't know, maybe not. I need to finish the game first. But I'm at a point right now where in my head, I'm legitimately convinced that we will get like a standalone DLC Lost Legacy style, where we will play as Atreus with the ending, the real ending, or the post-credit ending, or whatever we want to call it. We hear Brock's voice. We hear him. Do we think that like that will play into, because in my head, I'm thinking we're going to get a game where we play just as Atreus. It will be like half the length, maybe even shorter than this game, where he goes on his mystery. The thing is Sindri or Mimir makes a comment where he says, no, he's lost now because he
Right.
didn't die with all of his soul, but he's lost. And they kind of leave this like air of mystery here where like because he doesn't have all of his soul, he's not anywhere. Like, do we think that like Atreus now, like there's going to be a moment where Atreus, like that's his to get to basically mend his relationship with Sindri, which was such a pivotal moment throughout the entirety of the game up until Brock's death. That like that will be Atreus's like the next story for Atreus is him retrieving all four pieces of Brock's soul, putting him back together and bringing him back to life to mend that relationship. Whether he succeeds or not, I don't know, obviously. But like, do we think that this is going to be something that happens?
I don't. And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
I think there are two reasons why. I think the first reason is in the bit about his soul, like earlier in the game, which I really liked that at first Mimir kind of introduces the idea that there are four parts of a soul. And this has nothing to do with Brock. Like we don't know that it's about Brock. It's about Finrir at the beginning. And then Sindri tells the story about how Brock dies. He lost one of his four parts of his soul. So now he just has three of his four parts. So the first reason why I wouldn't think so, even though I do love that idea, is he only has three parts of his soul because one of his four parts was destroyed when he first died. So I don't know that there's a fourth one to find. Maybe there is, but and then the other thing, and this is more of an opinion thing than a like the game suggested to me. My answer is that I kind of really love that this game ends with Sindri just bitter and his relationship with Atreus is completely broken because that's fucking life. Like there are people that we lose in our lives and that whether it's over something as serious as you accidentally caused the death of his brother or something a lot more, not serious. I can't think of the word I'm looking for. So kind of like this idea that like Sindri is just broken now because of this. And there might not be coming back from that for him. So that would be kind of my second reason. Like I feel like it's a stronger ending for them to leave this relationship broken because like that there's that line during the siege when Atreus, because Kratos says it like when he's doing the big corralling speech of like to win a war you have to be willing to sacrifice everything. And they didn't sacrifice a ton, right? They lost Freyr and they lost Asgard, but like they didn't care about Asgard. But Atreus did have to sacrifice his relationship with Sindri in order to save the world, essentially. So I think that kind of goes with that kind of mindset of in order to win the war, you had to sacrifice everything. And while it wasn't everything, I do think that they're kind of done with each other. But
I'm not even getting that. I'm not even going to get that deep about it. I think Sindri is unjustly mad at Kratos and Atreus, and
agreed. Actually,
like I'm just like, bro, like they didn't do anything. Like you should be mad at Odin because Odin's the one who killed Brock, and like I really was just like, yo, you're mad for. I don't like how things ended because it's just like. He knows that he even, he confided to Atreus, like, hey, like, I did this that I shouldn't have done, but I was selfish and I wanted my brother back.
Sure.
And then his brother died and he's lashing his anger out, not even on, like, the person that is responsible when it should really be himself. He really should be mad at himself for the actions that he did. Or even not so because Brock said that like he forgives him and he knows what he did, but like, yeah, I just think that like he shouldn't like that should not have ended with him the way it did. Personally, it felt a little bit like disingenuous of his character.
Sure.
And I think that and I also think that this game, which I really don't know how I feel about it, but the first game, like both of them Brock and Sindri felt like equals, and in this one, like Sindri is obviously the more focused character of the two,
sure.
And that didn't feel right to me. I knew that we were eventually going to have a moment or a mission with Brock because of how heavy the Sindri stuff was getting. And that was a great moment for Brock, you know, blessing the weapon, blessing the
Yeah, love
spear.
that.
Yeah,
I
that was
love
awesome.
I love that moment a lot. But it was just like, yeah, I just like I just didn't like how Sindri, like how that stuff with Sindri went. I don't think it was genuine of his character. And like I think that Kratos and Atreus are the last two people for him to be upset about it. Like, I
Yeah,
don't know.
it was definitely a little dissonant because like with the whole thing of Brock dies, Sindri brings him back without part of his soul. And as Brock's dying, he's like, I know you did this and it's okay. Like, just let me die this time. Like, we can't do this again. I feel like that should have been enough. Like,
Yeah.
Brock, I mean, Sindri obviously could be upset, but yeah, for it to then be to go all the way through the second, like, I do kind of ultimately, I narratively, while it didn't quite work with me, I still was okay with it, and I think it was effective for me. But it did. I was kind of like, I wonder why we're having him do that when the kind of given circumstance of what you set up here was that he should be okay with it once, because the fear was that Brock, he was afraid that Brock was going to not forgive him for not letting him die, and he forgave him. So like,
Yeah.
but I don't know.
Again, I think ultimately he was angry with himself, and he took that anger out on the people that he loved.
Sure.
And you know, you can see it that way, but it's also just like, bro, like you also got revenge on Odin by
Yeah,
destroying the
you killed
orb
him.
too. Um and I think that, yeah, I do think it was very effective how they, like, the moment they decided to show how Sindri like teleports basically between the realms. Because normally like he just kind of appears, but they appear behind a rock, or they appear behind something, they walk out, and it's just like he destroys the orb and then he just like blinks out, and it's just like like that moment hit me. I was just like, oh fuck, like they did it, they showed us that finally.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that ultimately, you know, I get the whole, it could have been just him not being able to, again, lashing his anger out on other people, but also like he's the only one who, like, of the main cast that like kind of doesn't have a what you'd consider a happy ending in this story, and it
Sure.
just feels weird. It
Yeah.
just doesn't feel right.
Well, see, that's why I'm like leaning towards this thought process that like this is not the end of Sindri's story. And I don't know if it's the end of Brock's either, especially because of the way that it ends. But I do want to ask the question. Speaking about the ending, so a lot of this whole build, I mean, the entire purpose of everything leading up into Ragnarok is Odin's attempt to be able to open this rift that we
Yeah.
know nothing about,
Mhm.
and it is very fucking vague. And it's like Atreus is going to find all these parts of this mask so that he can look into the rift, because apparently Odin believes that inside the rift is all of this, the knowledge of how creation works and how life is and all this stuff. Do we think that that's going to play into another game, or are we done with this? Because when he snaps the mask at the end, the rift closes, it disappears, it's no longer there.
Yeah, the mask goes into the rift.
Yeah, and is this the end of this? Is this going to be brought back up? Like, this is such a huge thing. And so I'm like, is this just plot armor, or is this something that might be explored later? Also, I do want to talk about the fact that, like, where does Kratos' story go from here?
Sure. Well, so the first thing with the rift, I don't know if this was on purpose, but before Garm is turned into Fenrir, when Garm is like scratching and like opening up tears into reality to go to different realms, like it was the exact same color, shape, like it looked like a Garm scratch, just with one, not five or whatever. So I don't know if that was on purpose, because if it was that, then like I would assume there was another way to open up that kind of tear. So then I would think, maybe they do. But it did feel to me like the destroying of the mask kind of closed that door. And I mean, with Odin being dead, like, I don't know, maybe if we did go down the route of trying to get Brock, like maybe that's a way that they could try to find Brock. But what are you thinking?
I have a huge huge thing that just popped inside of my head. Are you ready for this?
Yes, I'm ready. Tell me.
What if it is not just it's a rift. It is a rift, but what if it's a rift that takes you time and place? We get a final game in Kratos' story in which Kratos goes back to Greece to basically right the wrongs that he made. Like that started off all of God of War in the beginning.
But would that mean he doesn't have Atreus?
Yeah, that means he doesn't have Atreus.
Fuck. Okay, never mind. Remove this. Edit this out of the
Strike
show. And strike this from the record. Edit this out of the show. This cannot be published for human ears to hear. The three of you.
I do think it would be cool to have him go back, though.
I mean, now that you
Because,
say
yeah, okay,
that's a shit answer.
Yeah,
but he could go back. He could save. He could potentially use the power to try to save or right wrongs. Because according to Faye, right, in that the big final panel, and I could be completely wrong here, but for me, the final panel read to me was that it's Kratos on top of a pillar and people are praising him, and it brought me back to the conversation he has with Odin when Odin says like, were you a god? Like he says something along the lines of like, were you a god that people praised and that people prayed to? And Kratos is like, no. And he's like, then you don't know how I feel. And this means nothing to you. You mean nothing to anyone.
Sure.
And then like his final panel is him actually being praised and held up as a god.
And we see the tear.
Which we've never seen. So it's like, I don't know. For me, it's like, okay, so Kratos' story for me is like some sort of path of redemption. Not that this hasn't been a path of redemption, but it's like a path to be like, either the next game is going to be Kratos and he is going to be elevated to godhood where he is looked upon as like a very righteous deity. And then there's got to be some conflict obviously surrounding that. But it's like, I don't know, like Kratos it just seems like whatever happens next, like Kratos has to now be like the light of the beacon of hope is now going to be Kratos' story, where it's always been his first 3 games. Well, not first 3 games. What? It's 5 games, 6 games, 6 games have always been about vengeance and hate. And then the last 2 games have been about like redemption and that. So like, what is the next step for Kratos? In my head, the next step for Kratos is like, it has to be something to do with like, he is the beacon of hope now. Like he has to finish his arc or he dies. I don't know. I mean,
I kind of feel like, we're going to get another God of War game eventually. I don't think it'll be anytime soon. I think it'll probably take a similar amount of time off between.
Corey Barlog's kids have to be adults by the time, because like he's at that point, he has to be a grandpa for the next one. He has to tell Kratos is a grandpa now. Like it's so ambivalent to his life. He has to be. What's the next step in Corey Barlog's life?
Being on this podcast, I think.
Then Kratos is going to become a podcaster, and we all know how people think about podcasters. Not very highly.
Oh boy. Yeah, I feel like at the moment it seems to me like Kratos' story is done, but I know that it won't be. Like they will bring him back at some point because I don't foresee them making Atreus be the lead of a game. Maybe they do. I don't know. Cam, what do you think? Do you think we get more Atreus? Kratos.
Again, because he's alive, we gotta.
Sure.
Because again, it would be Atreus, and it's just like, I don't want to play Atreus when I can play Kratos, like, but also, I don't know, like, I feel what path is there? Like, there was a reason for him to enter the Norse mythology, for this arc, like after God of War 3. Now it's kind of just like, okay, we're kind of chilling.
Sure.
And so what would be the reason for there to be more God of War outside of like it sells very well?
Right.
Like in real life.
I think for me the one thing that does make me think that there could be more. So Atreus at the end of the game goes off to find the giants and bring them back and that kind of thing. So I feel like the natural next step would be something about that goes wrong. Kratos finds out he has to go save Atreus. whether that's with Faye, with someone else, with a new companion, alone, I don't know. But then my question becomes, I almost kind of feel like they played all their cards from a thematic standpoint. And what I mean by that is the first games being a little one note, being a little like, came in what you mentioned, like their vengeance, their hate, those kinds of things. And now we have this like full 3D character, or and like we've seen growth, we've seen change, and it was such a grand, epic tale. Can you tell something bigger than Ragnarok? I don't know, but I mean, do you need to? Maybe.
You could potentially bring him back to his roots with something along the lines of like, something does go wrong and Atreus is killed, and then we're back to the original Kratos, where it is a path of vengeance, but it blends both. The new Kratos and the old Kratos are dueling it out on like who is going to be this Kratos that's going to come forward next, whether it's going to be this new version of Kratos who is filled with hope, is filled with not positivity, but like filled with this like sense of like purpose now, outside of just kill everything in front of me. It is now having to do battle with his old self, where it is like, this is the life I gave up, and now you've taken that from me, and I'm going to do what it takes to fit. And then like you have something like that. I could see that, but at the same time, like, I don't know, man. This I feel, I don't know. I feel like Sony Santa Monica, I feel like, has enough goodwill right now where they could literally shelve God of War for 10 years and just do whatever the fuck they want for the next 10 years. They could do another IP. They could do whatever else they want to do. And Sony's not going to be like, you have to make God of War 110. Like, you have to make another, like, we're on another one, like another. Like, they have that goodwill built up where they can do something like that. But to Cam's point, like from the very beginning of this podcast, I'd fucking love to go back and get like an original style God of War, and that'll never happen through probably a Sony owned, like Sony owned company. But man, there's something about like those old PS3 style games. It's like something like, I'm really excited to actually play Evil West, even though like a lot of people were like, man, it feels like a PlayStation 3 game. Like, don't shit talk PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. That generation was fucking dope. Sure. You guys could kiss my ass if you think otherwise. So like, I would love to see some shit like that. Like, I would love for that to happen where we do get that. But for what happens next, like, I trust that they'll make the right decision. They haven't led me astray so far, but I do think it's time to shelve God of War for a little while, whether it's a few years or whatnot. I don't know.
Yeah, well, we know that their next game is going to be that sci-fi game. I think that's pretty open knowledge, is that they're working on a new sci-fi IP. What that is actually going to look like remains to be seen. But yeah, I would be okay if this was the last God of War game. I love God of War. Like, I love all the games. And I think that I really just don't think that there's anywhere to go that's exciting with Kratos being alive, that is. And I could see a smaller experience with Atreus, and it's like only Atreus. But like, I don't think it would be specifically regarding the whole Brock subplot. Sure. So yeah, I'm okay. Like, I think that this is a good way to kind of close the chapter on Kratos. Unless they, I think that if they were to do something, they would do something very unexpected, similar to what like Naughty Dog did with Last of Us Part 2.
Sure.
Not saying that they couldn't do that, but I think that if there were a game where Kratos were to die, I think it would have to be at the end of that game, and I think that opportunity is passed. Especially because there were a few moments in this game where it kind of kept on foreshadowing it. Like there was
Oh yeah, for sure.
yeah, there were so many moments where they were foreshadowing it, and because there was the amount of times where he's talking about like, oh, I'd die for my kid, you know, I'd die
Yeah,
for my
yeah.
son, like, and then just like the moment when you let the first jellyfish free, which
Oh,
what a great moment. That's
what a great moment.
what a great both
I'm so
times.
glad you brought that one up. Yeah,
Yeah, both
times.
times were fantastic for different reasons. Yeah, like basically like Mimir telling Atreus like, hey, your dad just wants to spend time with you.
Yes.
And that was something that hit home hard for me as someone who's like dad has passed at this point.
Yeah.
And so like, you know, there was just so much building up to that, and then it not being the case is just kind of like, you know, it still kind of fits the whole like, you know, Atreus is ready to be on his own type thing, but it doesn't hit remotely as emotional if Kratos were to die. And
Yeah.
I think again, I think that goes into the whole like the number of plot points and messaging that and themes that this game tries to handle, and like some of them they handle well, some of them they handle okay, and some of them they don't handle well. So it's just like,
I wonder if part of the reason they keep Kratos alive is because if he dies, like, what do you do in the post game? Because and like Sony Santa Monica is like, especially with the last God of War, like they obviously care a lot about post game because there's a bunch of post game content for this game, and the whole thing, like, apparently when another thing from these other spoiler casts was when Corey handed off this game to the new director, he's like, the three things you have to include: Atreus has to leave, Brock has to die, and Ragnarok has to happen. It's like, okay, well, one of your rules is that Atreus has to leave. So if he leaves, like, the post game can't be after he left if he leaves, because and Kratos dies, because then there's no one around to do the post game stuff, right? Unless you play as Faye, which I guess could have been cool. And so I wonder if how much of that, if any, that choice was because, well, how is the player going to continue playing in our game if he is dead?
So I think that there's a way that you can do this in a second, or like a final Kratos story. And the way that would work is at the end of the game, you almost do like Red Dead Redemption. Well, technically Red Dead Redemption 1 or 2, right?
Sure. Spoilers.
Sorry, spoilers for this game. What you can do is the way that you end Kratos' story is that you take it to approach of like, I am leaving you my legacy. And you have like the moment Kratos does meet his final end, and he gives Atreus like the blades of chaos, or the chaos blades.
Sure.
And that's like his parting gift. Like, this was my burden before. This is now my gift to you. This is my legacy. Do better with what I have been given. And then the way it does is like with Red Dead Redemption, where you aren't playing as Kratos anymore, but you're playing as Atreus, but now you have Kratos's weapons. You now have Kratos's abilities or whatever. And then it's Atreus now leading off with that legacy and then carrying on. So, you know, the character model looks different, but
sure,
you know, you still have everything that you had before. You just now have it in a different character model, and you can still have post game. But then again, I mean, that's saying that like that the next God of War is even going to launch on the PlayStation 5.
Oh, definitely is not.
Like, you know, so it's like, and I think the big reason that like we need to take pause on that is because if you look at the way that the game shifted from the PlayStation 3 to PlayStation 4, like, what will games look like on the PlayStation 6? You know, like, what will games be then? Like, what is the style of game? It might not be a situation where post game is a thing that like every game has to have a post game, right?
Sure.
So it could be like completely different. Like the way games are made might, like, the style of game might just be very different then, and we might be back to like a Last of Us style, like when the game ends, and there's no like longevity to it, or everything could be a games as a service, and you know. It's just whatever you know. You don't even play as Kratos anymore. You play as your generic white man with a shaved head because
God.
all of our character creations suck. Looking at you, Pokemon, you fucking bastards. Sorry, I'm getting off topic there, but
Hey,
like
that's
I don't
okay.
know. Who knows? Like who knows what games will look like then, whenever the next one is. So that might be very different. But I do think like if there is going to be a finality to Kratos' story, I think the way that they do that is by it's passing off the legacy to Atreus. So if they do decide to make more God of War games, it might not be Kratos, it might be Atreus, but you're still carrying along whatever legacy that Kratos left behind, and that being his thought.
Yeah.
And so,
in terms of I've done a very bad job of bringing in the audience at all so far because we've just been talking so much. But to kind of close out the next game conversation, Skylar from our audience, hey Skylar, he said, "I know we didn't get any DLC for God of War 2018, but I'd love to see Atreus / Loki's solo adventure for its own game instead of a DLC. A more fun DLC to me would be playing as Faye and her Vanaheim destroying fight with Thor. Would love to see that, and maybe some Thrud." Which actually, before I read the rest of this, have either of you seen Thrud in the post game?
No.
not yet.
There's a really cool moment that I don't want to spoil.
Okay.
But that does make me wonder, could there be something in the future with Thrud in a game? It's in Alfheim when in that like store in the middle of Alfheim between the two like deserty areas or whatever. Go there at some point and check that out because that could be a potential next game or like a DLC type situation, like Skylar says. So who knows?
Okay, what if it's like we fast forward to the future and it's like American Gods? You guys ever read American Gods or watch the show?
I read half the book. I couldn't finish it.
I know
All
what you're talking about, but I haven't. No.
Okay, so for anyone who doesn't know, American Gods basically it's you have your old gods, so you have your like Odin is in it, you have your Egyptian gods, like they're your old gods, and then you have your new gods, and your new gods are things like television and the internet, and like these are your art, like this generation's the new gods, right? And it's like them trying to like duke it out and battle for like supremacy, essentially
In a sci-fi setting. The new
It's
Sony Santa Monica game.
They're making an American's God game. I'd fucking play the shit out of that one. But so what if we set the game in the future and it's basically like Atreus and Thrud and they're like duking it out with the internet. Like they're going toe to toe with Twitter. And they're just like, fuck, like we're taking the Twitter down.
Look, if I could as Atreus or Thrud beat the shit out of Elon Musk, I would play that game. Is all I'm saying.
I mean, that sounds fantastic, honestly. I think we just made our first million, guys.
I think maybe so. A couple of the moments I wanted to talk about, these are smaller ones, so we won't go too deeply on these. Do you remember in the last game, the moment at the end when you realize that all of the markings throughout the game were Faye leading you on this journey? In this game, did they address that? Like, or did they just be like, oh, there's just white markings everywhere to tell you where to go, and because it's a video game? Like, was there a reasoning this time, or was it just?
It felt very like Horizon Forbidden West,
where it's like, why is there just paint?
I didn't know that was the thing
in the first game.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, it was toward the end of the game, like and then they kind of allude to it a little bit in this game too, where like the last time you're with Faye and she's putting her hand in the gold paint and she's like putting the paint on the trees.
Yes.
So the implication at the end of the first game was that all of the gold paint that you see throughout was Faye like leading you on this journey to get here. And so I was surprised that because they very clearly lay that out in the first game, that this time there's white paint everywhere and there's no reason for it. I was surprised for a game that seems to kind of have an answer for most things, for it to just be, this time it's just there because it's
I don't even know if I remember it's white paint.
So they're like Norse markings on things.
To kind of guide you, like, hey, you can climb here or you can jump here.
Oh, okay.
Those kinds of things. Yeah.
Did you ever notice that like they would a lot of times when there were like secret chests or whatnot to find, that they would mark them by like dropping like a health gemstone or like a rage gemstone, like in a certain spot that you'd be like, why is that there? So you walk over and then you turn the camera a little bit. You're like, oh fuck, I can go down this entirely new path.
Yeah.
Like just absolutely genius to me. Like
I also
absolutely genius.
I really liked in this game, like from a gameplay and like mechanic standpoint, all of the new kinds of puzzles, whether it was from the Nornir chests, like with the spear things. You didn't like those, Cam?
I didn't like the hex, the pink magic
Where like
puzzles.
you bounce the.
I felt like
I know what you're talking about. Where you have to do the bubble
chain the
ticket.
arrows, and then did not like those because I felt like that there were several times where like it was like there are ones where they're far away and it's like okay, it's kind of hard to tell if you're like your circles are touching. There are ones where it's clear as day those circles are touching, and then there's the thing doesn't like get bigger, so it's like hey, you chain the circles, and I was just like I don't know about that.
Of the new puzzle mechanics, that was the one I didn't like.
Yeah.
But I like in Alfheim the bouncing the Leviathan axe off of the different like
that
glass
was great.
things.
Yeah, that was great.
And then implementing it in combat I thought was so cool.
Yeah, that was cool.
I really like that. And then I liked all the spear stuff, whether it was like throwing it into the
wall so you could swing on it and climb,
or whether it was like getting rid of things in your way. Which, speaking of that, have either of you gone to Niflheim after the game?
I really haven't played outside of Brock's funeral. I haven't really played a lot of the post game myself, just because there's so many games and I gotta play other stuff.
Pokemon has broken me from doing anything post the funeral.
Well, how do we feel about me spoiling something for you guys? Since you
go ahead,
go for it.
Tyr is in this game.
Okay,
and it's really fucking cool. And I don't know if you want me to say anything more than that.
And you said we're in Niflheim?
Yeah.
Okay. That's that. I mean, no. He was found in Schwarzheim. Okay. How easy is it to like get there?
So there's this area in Niflheim that was previously not accessible that is now accessible, which is kind of a thing in the post game. Like there's a lot of places that open up that you couldn't get to originally that just like weren't there. Like you pass this place in Niflheim anytime you go to the Raven Tree, and it was just like an ice wall, and now the ice wall's gone.
Okay.
And it's like this whole area that's like a puzzle essentially, and it's pretty cool. I would definitely, if you're not gonna do any post game stuff, I would do that at the very least, because it's pretty cool. Some of the it's funny, like some of the coolest stuff so far for me has been in the post game, and it's like how many people are not seeing this because they're like, okay, I hit credits, I need to go play these other games.
Okay, here's another thing. Now I'm thinking about it. Why would Odin pretend to be Tyr when he specifically, explicitly didn't want Ragnarok to happen? He literally helped cause the events that were in the prophecy by pretending to be Tyr.
Okay, because Tyr, no. Okay, I was going to say because Tyr kind of led Atreus to make the decision to go meet with Odin, but that's not true.
Right. I mean, yeah, I would have to replay it to see, because so he knows that the prophecy says that he's going to die because of this. And so he wants to try to get information on what Atreus and Kratos are doing. But then it's like, how would he know to be Tyr? That's a good, that might be a pretty thick
plot hole. That is a huge plot hole.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's something, I don't know if that's something that there is an answer that I just am not thinking of, or if it's a huge plot hole, but it might just be a huge plot hole.
A huge plot hole?
Correct. Just like the Cab Avenue.
Just like the Cab Avenue.
I didn't even, I just thought, I was like, wait a minute.
I feel like that's such a big plot hole. There must be an answer that we just
because the game starts and he's just like, hey, Kratos, don't want Ragnarok to happen, so let's just be amicable and not do anything. Like, you know what?
In the opening...
Speaking of which, honestly, like legitimately, probably my favorite moment of that entire game is just when they're talking in the house in the beginning.
I was literally about to bring that in.
I was just cool. Like, I was in it. I was just like, yes, give me this incredible acting right now.
Yes.
Like, and just, I don't know how, like, Christopher Judge, like, you know, I do think that Roger Clark should have gotten the performance for Arthur over Kratos in. I think Red Dead Redemption 2 is a much better game than God of War 2018. That being said, just the way he said no to Odin was like I can't describe it. It was just perfect. It was
that
just
scene is incredible.
Yeah, no, just the way he got up and just the way he was looking at him and just how calm and collected he was with just like the whole tension in the room. Wow.
And like with Richard Schiff as Odin, like what a perfect casting choice.
Okay, but did anyone catch the scene when Atreus first shows up and they're like talking in Odin's chambers, and Richard Schiff, who plays Odin, gets up and he's like, "Let's walk and talk."
Yeah,
and I was like, "God damn it! They threw a West Wing reference in this game." Get
sure did.
here.
They sure fucking did, and I thought that was so funny, and I loved it. But yeah, I love that they leaned into, because like Richard Schiff, a lot of the time plays characters like this, and I like that they didn't make Odin just like a big, almost kind of like Thor, like this big, just like overpowered guy. I liked that they made him very much like he's not a very menacing looking person. He's not a very strong looking person. He's just going to fuck you by tricking you or by like lying to you or whatever. And I liked that they did that. And because Richard Schiff is such an accomplished actor and so good at it, those kinds of scenes I thought were just so good. And like all this stuff with Atreus in the basement.
So here's what I'm going to say actually. And maybe again, I didn't feel this way for a majority of the game, but I did feel it partway through, like for a good amount, to the point where I want to bring it up. So part of me was like, okay, on top of Loki being like connected to animals and stuff like that, he is also a god of mischief. So I'm just like, there was points in this game where I was like, are we not supposed to, the player not supposed to trust what Atreus is doing?
Sure, as Loki,
yeah. I was just like, am I trying to be deceived right now? Like again, for like the first, like, I want to say like third of the game, I was just like, because Kratos and Atreus, like, they were not like on the same page, and then like Atreus was just like withholding information. Like, that was the thing that was also annoying in general. Like, he was like, why can't you just trust me? He's like, dude, just tell him the truth. You have no reason to withhold this information. Like, I don't care. I don't care if you think that he's going to be like, oh no, you shouldn't do this, that, and the other. Like, bro, like, you're going to do, what did he do at the end of the day anyway? He did what he wanted to do. Kratos didn't stop him. He couldn't stop him. So it's just like, just tell him. Like, I just felt like that there were like some character decisions. Like, I get that the point of this game was to like, the importance of like a parent trusting a child and like that type of stuff. But like, I wish it was just done in a better way where like it just felt more believable. Like, again, it was just one of those things. It's kind of similar to the thing that I was saying for like a good part of that first half of the game. I'm like, is Atreus stupid? What's going on? Like, why is he making these decisions?
I think it's because he's like 13.
But but he's 13, but he's way more grown than that. Like,
sure.
After everything that he's gone through, like, he should be like, he's like a 13-year-old, but he should have like the kind of he should be acting like he's like an 18-year-old after everything that he's gone through.
Sure.
Like, I think that he should be feel like a much more grown, like, oh, you're very mature for your age. Like, that's how Atreus should, at least how I perceived him going into this game.
I wonder if we do see Atreus again, I wonder if we'll get the trickstery, like, chaotic version of Loki as an adult, because he's still like learning his god powers, maybe.
Sure,
but that's a good point. Like, that
he says all the time that he runs off of chaos. Like, I run off of chaos. I'm leaning into the chaos part. Like, do chaos, and Kratos is like, no, that's dumb as shit. Which, fair, that is dumb as shit, because he fucks up a lot of stuff throughout the entirety of the whole game. It's like, But
yeah, and like his whole thing, like Cam, what you were mentioning, like you just have to trust me, and he won't tell him. Like that's a little. This is a stretch, I will say, but like that's a little chaotic to be like, just tell him your fucking plan, and you don't have to be doing all this backdoor bullshit.
It just felt like they had to do certain character moments that
sure
didn't feel like fit the character, I guess. Like, at least to me, like if this was like 2018, like Atreus, maybe I would give a little bit more leeway there, but I just feel like that there's a lot of things in general, whether it be character choice, like character decisions, or plot things, like it feels like conveniences to tell the story they want to tell.
Sure.
Than like something that fits more accurately.
I came into this spoiler cast 10 out of 10 game. I'm walking away from this 6.5. Too much plot armor.
Sure. What a terrible game.
Too much water. Just too much water.
No. But again, like I really like this. Again, I like this game overall more than 2018, just simply because again, there's a lot of stuff with Kratos specifically that I really like. I think the combat is just more refined, and that's awesome. I still think, you know, some of those hitboxes when you're doing some dodges there are a little suspicious to say the least.
Especially against those fucking berserkers. Oh my god, those hitboxes do not exist.
Oh yeah, when I fought the lightning berserker dude, I was about to punch a wall, dude.
I gave up.
I've only done one so far.
I've done two, and the second one was this lightning one. I was just like, these hitboxes are insane. I don't know. Yeah. I really like this game. It has some genuine surprises that I did really like. Again, I still have I think it's a messy game narratively. It, you know, partly because, you know, mainly because of just what it was, and I'm just disappointed with how some of the things, you know, didn't turn out how like I would hope. I don't think that like that doesn't affect my opinion of the game, but like I was just like, man, like what if this, what if that type thing. And you know, I still think it is a fantastic game. I definitely think it should be in the game of the year conversation for sure. Like it's an incredibly well made game. I don't know if I would like give it a 10 out of 10 personally, because like I get that there's it's a high productive it's a from a production standpoint, it's a lot of money's went into it, and incredible performances and visually it looks stunning, but you know that for me that only goes so far.
Sure.
And I know that goes a long way for other people, and that's fine.
Cayman, final thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't know. I definitely feel like this conversation has opened my eyes to some narrative choices that like maybe didn't stick the landing that they should have, honestly. But I think it's enough to say, one, this game is better than God of War 2018. Like, there's just no question about it. Like, it is just a better game. And that's from mechanics, from the fact that it's just more fleshed out in a lot of different ways, whether it's enemy types and boss encounters now and like things that we didn't get in the first game I now have, because I thought Red Dead 2 was game of the year for me that year when in 2018. I thought that was just a better game. I'm now looking at this being like, I'm looking at this compared to Elden Ring and still struggling on like what I think is the game of the year between the two of them. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I don't think a number score matters. I don't think it really matters like what I slap down on being like, you know, fine tuning and saying it's an 8 or a 9 or a 10. I don't think matters as much as it is like, this is a game you have to play if you have a PlayStation. Like
for sure.
You don't
100%.
I don't think that there's a game on PlayStation right now that hits this level of like just polish in terms of gameplay mechanics and story and impact in terms of emotions. You shouldn't not. Now, do I think that this is a game that is like you need to just go and sell your Xbox or sell your PC to get a PlayStation 5 to play. No, I don't think that that's the case. If you have expendable money and you've been on the fence, I think this could tip the scale for you to say, hey, like if you're looking at Xbox and you're looking at a PlayStation right now, with Starfield still on the horizon and we don't really know what that looks like yet, I would say if you're going to make a console decision based on the games available, I think God of War really does help nudge you a little bit closer to being like, yes, sure. Game Pass is as of right now, Game Pass I think is much better still than PlayStation Premium. But with that being said, I do think that like if you're looking for standalone titles that are console exclusives, I think this gives PlayStation a significant edge currently over what you're probably getting on Xbox. With that being said, though, like I love this game. I think this game was really fucking good, and this game will stick with me for a long time. And I do recommend it. Like, what wholeheartedly, I recommend this game to anyone that owns a PlayStation. Like, if you're not playing this game, you're woefully missing out. Like, you just need to play this game. So yeah, that's where I stand. I don't think a score matters. I just think that this is a game that's 1000% worth playing.
Yeah, Cameron, any final thoughts?
Yeah. Like I agree with what you're saying. Like, and here's the thing with like, I'm not trying to open a can of worms here, but like with score, like score, like having a score for a game, it's just a useful guide. I don't think it's like, for some people it means more than others. Like, this is a must play game. This is a must play game. Like, easy. And as someone who primarily, I wore a PlayStation shirt because I knew we were talking about PlayStation first party games, but I'm an Xbox guy, like I'm on IGN Unlocked. Like I'm talking about Xbox with Ryan McCaffrey and the whole team there and stuff like that. Like I love Xbox. That's my primary console. But like, this is a reason to buy a PS5. And I mean, I would personally say that there have been games that came out beforehand that before God of War Ragnarok that warranted getting a PS5 beforehand. In my opinion, Returnal was my game of the year last year. But this is a phenomenal game, and I think that it shows just that PlayStation continues to release high quality titles, and that which is something that I would argue that Xbox is struggling with, but we have seen improvement over time,
for sure.
And that's a whole nother topic.
Sure.
And yeah, it's exciting, and I'm really at the end of the day excited just to see what Sony Santa Monica is going to do next, because it'll be the first time we're getting a non God of War game since 2005, or like since the beginning of the studio. Like, you know what I mean? It's been like, that's what that studio has done. You know what I mean? Like, so it's exciting to see what the future of that studio is going to be. At the end of the day, I know that I said like I had a lot of issues with this game. I loved it. I think that I really need to replay it and see if like those issues that I have were actually there, and maybe I'm just forgetting stuff, because again, it's a long game. But it's play it.
I just want to say, to piggyback off what you said, the last non-God of War game that Sony Santa Monica released was their very first game in 2001 called Kinetica, and I have never heard of it, and it is a fucking racing game.
Wow. God of War kart racer win, Sony Santa Monica.
Final Nation Racers, Sony Santa Monica, here's your calling.
Sci-fi, baby. Bringing in Nick from the audience for his final thoughts. He says, I feel like this game is why video games are the best media, in my opinion. They take everything great in the arts and blend it all together. This is why it beats Elden Ring for me, only because of the story. Elden Ring has the open world, and you can do whatever you want, and so many play styles in a gorgeous setting. But the one thing it's missing is a human story that I and everyone else can relate to. Also adding the death of Norse gods. A little bit of a joke there, but I haven't played all of Elden Ring yet. I only played a few hours, but like this, for me, it's pretty clearly my game of the winter as of right now. I mean, there's still a month left, and there's still games like Signalis to play, Cam. But I thought this game was a masterpiece, and there were obviously issues. I don't think any game can be perfect, right? But this is like a top tenner for me. And I'm interested to
Of
see
all
if like,
time?
maybe. I mean, it's always.
Okay.
I just finished it yesterday, so like recency bias. I'm a huge recency bias guy.
But is it
Okay.
better than Bulletstorm?
It's
Patrick?
I haven't played Bulletstorm yet.
Exactly, because you are not a real gamer.
You're right. I'm a fake gamer boy. And I'm a sucker for a story, and I really loved the story they told, even though there were some plot issues and things like that. And I loved something that we didn't even really talk about, like the introduction of the Draupnir spear, like bringing Kratos to his roots and giving the Spartan a spear, like those kinds of full circle moments. And like another thing we didn't talk about, the Brock's riddle, that when Brock is finally, like when you have the funeral and the post game, Mimir solves the riddle and like then it fades to black, gives you credits. Like those are the kinds of moments that I love, these kinds of high production value AAA games. And like they're like these, it's kind of like my favorite type of video game, is these like really bombastic big stories. And I think for the most part they nailed it more than they didn't for me. And so yeah, I mean, if you like God of War, I'm sure you've already played this game. But yeah, I definitely a high recommend for me. I don't know what kind of a number I would give it. It would definitely be very high if it wasn't a 10 out of 10, but it is. I was very, very impressed with this game, despite some of the flaws that we've talked about today. So, hey, let us know what you thought, your thoughts about God of War, things that worked for you, things that didn't. And we'll read a few on next week's show as well. Cam, what a beautiful conversation. Thank you for coming on the show. Tell the folks at home where they can follow you, where they can read your work, see your work, those kinds of things.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter at CamFinalMix. I'm also on Hive now at CamFinalMix. That seems to be like the
buzz.
Yeah, exactly. The kind of experimental replacement of Twitter if Twitter goes down south. So you can follow me there as well. I am technically a freelance writer, but really all I do is for IGN when it comes to my writing currently. So you can follow that on IGN.com. Most recent stuff that like it hasn't come out yet that I've done some previews for game wise, like you can play it, you can't play it yet. I got a preview for System Shock remake. I got a preview for Mina the Hollower, which is Yacht Club Games new title from the creators of Shovel Knight. Those are really those came out good. I'm everywhere, so
hell yeah. Well, thanks for coming on the show, my friend. You can follow the Twitter. You can follow us on Twitter at SpotGameSpot. You can follow me on Twitter at Patrick Schwag. Cayman, where can they follow you?
Kid Cayman or Save Trash Cinema. You can follow at Save Trash Cinema on all socials.
Boom. And then Instagram and Twitch and TikTok for Spotlight Games, Spotlight Games Pod. Speaking of Hive, I did actually get at Spotlight Games on Hive, if that ever does blow up. So it's the first time we got the actual thing. So you other Spotlight Games fuckers, get out of the way. I had a blast. Thank you for coming along on this ride. Cam, you're welcome back anytime. But until then, I want everyone to remember one thing and one thing only.